Hey, Diana Flegel here and Eddie Jones with Reality Coaching for Writers.
No fluff, just the real stuff.
Yay. That's right. We just want to give people the stuff that will help them succeed, right, Eddie?
That's right. That's right. We do spend an awful lot of time parsing through the things that we believe don't necessarily bring you success the way you had hoped for. And as I was telling somebody, they reached out to me on LinkedIn yesterday about book promotion. They said, "What has worked for you?" And I was like, "Prayer, prayer." And they were like, "Really?"
Yeah. You are so faithful, though, to show up,
Yeah, yeah.
do
But
your
but
part, and
yeah.
then, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so many people promise a lot, and you could do it. I mean, it's like we've talked about before. You could throw hundreds of dollars at a title. I'm thinking of one title right now. The author's already spent almost $600 this month to sell 48 copies. Well, that's not bad, but it's a losing proposition if you're trying to make money selling books. Fortunately, the author isn't trying to make money on the book. She's making it on the back end on speaking engagements and some other things. But that's the industry we're in. That's the struggle. And this is a good book. This isn't an indie book. This is published by a large major publisher. But that's the type of competition we're all facing out there. So that's why we're bringing you the real stuff and no fluff. Because
Right.
if it doesn't work for us, I don't recommend it. So anyway,
Yeah.
we're going to talk today about rejection. I think, right? Is that the
Yeah.
topic today?
Rejection is a part of every writer's journey, for sure. Eddie, have you suffered your
Yeah,
part?
I told Eva Marie, I think last year, she asked me if I was going to be at the Salo Awards at the Blue Ridge Conference, and I went, no, I'm not. I wasn't going to be at the conference anyway. But I was driving up just to see my friends and walk the mountain. And she asked if I was coming to the awards ceremony. I was like, no, and I said I'm not part of the conference, so it would be wrong for me to show up. And she said, that's not a problem. Edie doesn't mind. I go, yeah, but I still won't be there. She goes, why? And I was like, well, because I might not win. And she was like, yeah, so what? I said, it hurts too much. And that's what rejection is to me, and I think a lot of us. It does hurt. It does hurt.
We're humans, and especially when you've worked so hard, and you've birthed this baby, it's like somebody telling you your baby's ugly, right? That hurts. You just keep it to yourself. But yeah, you've worked so hard. This is a labor of love and sometimes years, and then you put it out there, and if it doesn't, isn't celebrated, it's very hard. It's a little, I think a lot of writers' theme song is that, I think it's Sheldon, My Achy Breaky Heart.
Yeah.
Definitely. But rejection does lead us into future endeavors. I think if we, can process it correctly. There isn't one well-published author that didn't meet with rejection in their career. I mean, we hear statistics thrown out at every conference. The Help was rejected over 40 times. Mark Twain was rejected, correct?
Oh yeah, Mark Twain was rejected numerous times, and even when he was published, a lot of times he didn't get along with his publisher because they didn't like what he was doing, and he didn't like their edits. And it is very. You said it well. It's very much like a relationship or a dating relationship. And so when somebody rejects your manuscript, it's as if they're rejecting you. And honestly, for me, it's like being in middle school all over again. I passed the note to the girl's friend, waiting to the response, and the girl's friend comes back with another note going, she ain't interested in it. That hurts.
Right. So, but let's talk about some of the basic reasons a proposal might be rejected by an agent. There's very basic things. It could be that you're not ready. Your material is not ready. You haven't really polished it. You're not presenting it properly, especially in a nonfiction book. You're really not presenting the material in a way that would make it easy for your reader to grasp. So it could be as basic as that. It could also be have nothing to do with you. It could just be that the publisher has recently published something on a similar topic, and so they don't have a need for it. I mean, we hear the one rejection as an agent that I always hated to get was, Diana, we're going to pass on this. We're really looking for fresh ideas on this topic. You know, the word fresh, it just keeps getting thrown out there. And I'm like, I thought this was fresh, you know. I thought this writer did have a unique slant or angle on this. But fresh is definitely having unique angle, but also having the credentials to back it up, you know,
Yeah.
as far as nonfiction. Now, talk to the viewers about some fiction.
Yeah, so the fiction, a lot of it is the same thing. It's just the story new and fresh. And of course, in fiction, it doesn't have to be. I mean, the Amish trend, I mean, on bookdeals.app, even now, I mean, we never published any Amish. Linda Glaze wanted me to publish Amish. I kept saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going down that path. And nothing against Amish. I just didn't want to be, I don't know, I don't wear a bonnet, so I don't know how to even evaluate it. But I mean, that's not fresh, but it continues to sell. Romances continue to sell. It's the same plot formula. It never changes.
Yeah, never changes.
It's so the freshness doesn't have to be there for fiction. It's the voice.
Yes. Yeah.
To a large degree, well, I mean, you've got to be able to string words together. I mean, you've got to be able to write well. And by that, I mean, the reader has to be able to understand what you're saying, you know, and if you are putting together convoluted sentences or you're doing point of views that keep shifting and the reader can't keep up, that's just a craft issue that can be addressed and fixed. But then it's down to voice. Do people like hearing your voice? Do they like the way you say things? And that's what voice is. Benny, my wife Benny and I, we listened to this podcast about this guy down in Alabama, and I'm not going to tell you the title of it because it's got a profane word in it, but the guy that they were interviewing was, just listening to him was funny. The way he talked and the way he described this town in Alabama was just hilarious. And I was thinking, this guy needs his own show just by the way he spoke. That's voice in writing. It's how you speak. And if that's fresh, then that's something the agents and the editors pick up on. They go, well, same old story, but I like the way he tells the story.
Right. Yes. Storytelling is so important. And we're finding in nonfiction, it's just as important now, because the swing is now for creative nonfiction, which is a combination of personal storytelling, applying it to practical advice, you know, and so those are the books that I like to read.
Yeah. So in fiction, I mean, I like to use the example of Mark Twain. I mean, I can almost always tell without somebody attributing the quote. I can tell a Twain quote. He's dry, he's got satire, and he's got a great way of using a word that you wouldn't have expected in his description of things. I love reading Dave Barry because he uses exaggeration so well in his humor. He's a gift at that. Has a real gift of it. But the other thing, back to rejection, for fiction, you can have all of those things. You can have a great romance story, Nicholas Sparks quality, for example, as far as the plot goes. You can have a great voice, and it can be set in an exotic location where everybody wants to go and visit that place. You can do all those things together, and then you still get rejected by the house because they've got somebody in-house successful already who's writing in the very same genre, and they do not want to upset that author.
Right,
you know?
Right.
And so you get a no going, I don't understand. I'm writing better than Karen Kingsbury. And your agent's going, they have Karen. They don't want to lose Karen. You know?
Well, and that brings up a good point, because it's not always about you and your writing. Because if they have somebody, it's about the financial risk. It's a huge financial risk for a publisher to take on a debut author. Huge, because it's, you know, they've got tried and true horses in the stable that they know they can continue to make money on. And like you said, even if got a little bit something extra, it's not going to be enough for them to go to risk their bottom line. So that is definitely one of the reasons.
That's part of it. But,
right.
In my case, I would say the majority of the rejection I've gotten over the years was deserved. It was the writing wasn't there. Early on when I went to the Blue Ridge Conference, I remember Ron Benray, I gave him something to read and he read it and he liked it. He was like, this is really good. You write really well. And I said, well, thank you. He said, where's the story going? I said, I don't have any idea where the story's going. And he's like, what do you mean? And I explained to him I was a humorous wrote a boating column with humor and all this, and I was really good at stringing words together. But I said, but I've never written fiction. He said, so you don't know how to write a plot? And I went, no, I never learned plot. So I have spent the majority of my writing career learning how to write plot and learning how to dissect plot and get really good at plot, because that was a hole, that was a weakness. Another time I had an agent, I sent a proposal, and the agent came back and said, your dialogue is on the nose. So, get better at that. Well, first off, I had to figure out what does on the nose dialogue mean? I have no idea what that means. That's how clueless I was. And so what I did is I started listening to TV shows. We like to watch Friends and, Seinfeld and things like that. I started listening to dialogue, and I started reading dialogue and learning dialogue, because again, that's a weakness in my writing. And it's like, if that's a problem, let's go fix it. And so there's usually the hard reality is there's usually an awful lot of truth in the rejections we receive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, that brings me up to another point is our response to reactions. I'm always amazed at the people that come back to me and say, well, so you didn't like it, but my family and my friend, no, they say, well, you didn't like it, but a lot of other people told me it was great. And I thought, well, you've come back to me, so now I'm coming back to you. And I just told them, I said, well, you've got to go outside your friends and family. You have to ask people that actually know something about story, crafting a sentence, and you have to have objective criticism. Your family and friends might be afraid to tell you the truth, so your response, don't respond. The best thing is say, or if you see them at a conference, just say thank you for getting back to me so quickly. But otherwise, don't respond. Don't defend yourself. You don't want to paint a bad picture of yourself, because you will, if you stay with your craft and you hone it, you will run into these people again. So you don't want to burn bridges, and you don't want to make yourself look foolish.
Yeah.
Another thing, though, is a lot of times as an agent and the publishing editor will come back to me about one of my clients with a conditional rejection. There might be something, they might have loved a lot of things that they read, but there might be one thing that they would like you to work on or change, or would you be willing, consider to, do this or that. And so many people, because it's a rejection, they don't even bother to respond to me as an agent and even come back and say, well, yeah, I could do that. Or honestly, I'm going to just keep looking, but if somebody gives you a conditional rejection based on a condition they'd like you to improve, then that is an open door to response, not to badger, but to respond and get right on it. Don't put it off, get right on it. So
yeah, the flip side of that is I made the mistake one time in my writing career where I had a conditional response from a publisher, and they said, if you'll make this change, we would be very interested in the story. And I thought about it, I prayed about it, and it just didn't feel right. It was going to change the story, not a lot, but it changed it significantly, just small. But I thought, what do I know? I mean, I'm new to this. To your point, maybe that's how this game is played. And so I went along with the change. And I remember I got an email from a good friend of mine, and he said, the soul of the story is gone. I don't know where it went. I don't know where, but it's gone. And that broke my heart,
Yeah.
But, so you have to be careful. You do.
Oh, you do. And that's why, especially when it's a client of mine, I've gotten to know them pretty well. And I would say, look, I don't want you jumping through hoops, because you might make this change for this publisher and they're still going to come back with a rejection. Making a change doesn't mean you're going to get a book contract, So I agree, Eddie. You've got to, don't sacrifice the soul of your story in that way if it doesn't sit right with you. But the thing is, you do have to give it consideration. You do have to honestly look at it. And I'd say 3/4 of the time, somebody that's a professional in this business will offer solid advice, but not always. There's always the exception. So yeah, that's too bad. I'm sorry you did that. I hope I didn't play part in that.
No.
You'll tell me later. Don't tell me now.
Well, you mentioned something that does play into this, and that is people in the industry give solid advice, and they give business advice. And so there's the other thing we need to keep in mind is the people who are in this business, agents, editors, publishers, acquiring people, all those people, they're working in an environment that they're very familiar with. Okay. Yes. And so when they see proposals come in and pitches, they're used to seeing it through that lens only. And they don't know whether you've got lightning in a bottle or not. A lot of times they cannot tell. They can tell great writing and they can tell a great premise. That they get. But they don't know what went into the story, right? And so they may overlook the small parts of the story that or at least you believe, are going to resonate with readers in a big way, because they just don't see that very often. And so you have to be careful when you hear a rejection, even from the experts. They may say, we don't see this as a good fit. And I'm thinking, for example, again, of Cindy Sproles, who her Appalachian fiction kept getting turned down because people said, we don't have that. We don't know what to do with it. It's a great story. It's good voice. We love the voice, but we don't know what to do with it. And eventually Kriegel said, we'll find a way to make this work. And they did. They did. Yeah. But
now there's a whole genre in the industry because of that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And the thing was, though, Eddie, is Kriegel rejected it first.
Right.
And then came back and said, we can't get the story out of our head. I keep thinking about it. We're going to go for it. So that was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to crawl on my soapbox here, because this is part of my passion is the diversity voice, because for so long it hasn't been there. I mean, if you're a person of color or a different culture trying to write to basically white women in America, I mean, that's the demographics of most fiction writers. But you had a tough road because it didn't resonate with them. And so therefore you get rejection after rejection. And finally, after all these years, diversity is finally beginning to have its own niche, and people are recognizing, hey, there's lots of people that want to read about different cultures and different backgrounds other than just us people, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's, you remember Marlene Banks.
Oh, yeah.
And Marlene, African-American from Philadelphia, a very good friend. And that's the very thing. She was writing at, 6-8 years ago. And not one Christian publisher would take on her titles until Moody, who was normally a nonfiction publisher, decided to take a stab at fiction. And they had an urban imprint. And they took 3 of her novels, some of the best fiction I've ever read, all about true circumstances in African-American history here in the United States that I wept my way through those novels because I never knew of these historical events that happened. I never was taught in our schools, about these events. But I was so thankful Moody took them and published them, and they did okay, but they disbanded their fiction, and then eventually they gave her the rights back. And I talk to Marlene all the time. I'm like, Marlene, get every, Black History Month comes, February. I'm like, Marlene, I start in like November telling her, okay, get those books back back on the market, because she's really good at self-publishing now. She's had to get good at writing her romance novels. She self-publishes them. So I told her, you know what to do. Get those books back out there. I'll promote them. I'll get everybody else to promote them, but you've got to get them back out. They're so relevant and so needed. And she wants to, but she's been busy, and she just it hasn't happened. But yeah, I agree, Eddie. I'm so glad we're seeing more of that. And Edwina Perkins, of course, being the acquisition editor at Ironstream Media now for an African American imprint.
So yeah, that's what it comes down to. A lot of times, it's that you may be writing in such a narrow niche that a larger house can't see it. That's back to the risk factor financially. They don't just see the sales numbers. Doesn't mean it's a bad story. Doesn't mean it doesn't have leadership. Just means it might not be a good fit at that house. And that's not a reflection on us. That's just the story.
Right. Yes. I would say, though, half of the rejections that do come is because, especially from an agent or an editor someone meets at a conference, it's going to be because they need to hone their writing skills a little more. They've got maybe a great storyline, but they just haven't honed their writing skills yet. So, Eddie, I have some resources that I recommend, but what are some resources that you've used that helped you hone your writing?
Well, I've always taken, I think part of it has to do with your personality, how you're wired. And so went with the model of find the people that I enjoy reading, whatever those authors are. And I like Twain, and because of the humor. And again, I mentioned Barry, Carl Heiss, and people like that. And then I devour what they write. I'll read it over and over again. And back before we had Kindles, I would take highlighters and I would highlight passages. I would highlight transitions. You get to a certain, at the end of a scene, and you've got to transition to something, and you're like, I don't know how to make the transition. So when I would find one of those, I'd dog ear the page, make a mark in the corner, good transition example. Ron Benray years ago, he had a saying. He said, writing nonfiction should be the easiest thing in the world, because all you've got to do is dissect the corpse. Just take it apart one piece at a time, one organ at a time, lay it on the table. When you're done, you've got all the pieces laid out, and then you just put it back together like a puzzle. It's all right there. There's no secrets to writing. It's all right there. And I took that to heart. So I thought, well, I'll just read the people that I enjoy and find out why they're selling so many copies and I'm not writing that well. And that's what I've done. And I've pretty much stayed within my narrow box. So that's why I write humor. That's what I enjoy. And every time I try to write romance, I don't really do a great job at it because I don't read a lot of romance, not that kind.
That reminds me of Eva Marie Everson. One of my favorite workshops that I ever sat in on that she taught, it was, she did movie scenes, and she took and related it to fiction writing. And it was so powerful because she showed us how they did it in a movie scene. And then she gave an example of how to bring it into your writing. And she said, just study films and study movies. And I thought, well, that's always fun too. But Eddie, I think that's the best thing. Number one is read what you want to write. I'm always amazed when people don't do that.
Well,
readers.
Yeah, and so the back and it's actually it can be a lot of fun, and so Benny likes to watch Hallmark movies, and again, I don't write a ton of romance. When I write romance, it's romantic comedy. It's
Right.
humorous. My guys are never the brightest in the world. Anyway, so it's almost slapstick humor, which is fine because that's what I enjoy. But the formula for romance, the way I learned that was to sit down and watch movies, Hallmark movies with Benny. And so she's watching it for entertainment. I'm watching it scene by scene
Right.
to look see what each scene is designed to do. And once I did that, I mean, I had 4 examples of Hallmark movies, and they all work off of the same formula.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
You know,
and the novels, love inspired, and well, it used to be years ago Steeple Hill romances, but Harlequin,
yeah,
Harlequin books had Steeple Hill as the imprint. Now it's love inspired, but same thing, formula, and it's not easy though to write. I mean, I thought I know this book formula. I'm going to sit down and write a romance novel, but it's harder than it looks.
it is harder than it looks, but it is good practice because
It is.
what you're doing, I always like to come back to it's either going to be a sports analogy or a musical analogy. If you're playing the piano, you keep playing the same chords, the same repetition, chopsticks, whatever it is, over and over and over. You're teaching your fingers how to play the piano. If you're strumming guitar chords, you're teaching your fingers how to play the chords over and over. You're not making music. You're not even really playing music. You're not playing a tune. You're
Right.
practicing. And that's what the formula stuff does and the scene development does. It teaches you how to write. And then when you get inspired with a story, when you see something and go, this needs to be told, you know how to put it together with your voice and with the soul.
Yeah, that's good. Very good, Eddie. Well, one of my favorite books for nonfiction and fiction writers altogether is Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott. Did you ever read that?
It's dog-eared, marked up. Yep. Yep.
I love that because she just breaks things down, and she also shows there's an honesty in her talking about the writing journey that I think there's a lot of romanticizing of what a writer's life should be. And I think that's why sometimes the rejections cut so deep, is because there's this romanticized version of what you imagine, and then there's reality of the writer's journey. And somehow we don't, the romanticized version is it's just going to happen. There's not work involved. But the reality is there's work. And I think she's so honest in that, especially about the first draft. And because it's true, you have to be willing to just write that first draft. And she has a euphemism that I like, she uses in that book, but I'll refrain from that one. But and then you tidy it up, but get your story down, but it also works for nonfiction too. You've got to be willing to just, write and get things down and then work on them. But what about The Artist's Way? Have you ever read that,
I don't
Eddie?
remember if I read that one or not. I'm assuming that has something to do not with seat of the pants writing rather than plotting and doing it by the formula would be my guess.
It's really just about the creative process. So whether your medium of your creative medium is paint or photography or writing, it's about the process. And it's really valuable. I love it. I've recommended it so many times. And now Julia Cameron is the writer. And I've taught this workshop many times as well, because the value of it is balancing the work with fun. Like we said, you want to, any creative, they have a well, and if they draw from that well, there has to be something in it to draw from.
Right.
And, you need to be able to recreate at times, uh, retreat, and Edie Melson wrote the book Soul Care for Writers, because you need to care for your soul. You have to feed your soul, and then you'll have more from that well. Like you said, you'll be going along and all of a sudden the idea comes, and then you draw from the well to write it. But
Yeah.
that's why I like recommending that book, The
And
Artist.
that's part of the danger. It's probably one of the greatest dangers to rejection I see, is you do not want to be in the middle of a creative process, working on a second manuscript or a third manuscript, your fourth book or whatever you're really excited about. You do not want to be doing that and then get the rejection, because that takes all the wind out of your sails. That boat just stops. And I mean, it happens with rejection, both from an agent or an editor, but it happens just as more often with the reviews. And that's why I tell authors all the time, stop going to Amazon and Goodreads and looking at your reviews. Stop. I mean, if you want to do it when you're finished with a project and you've gotten to the end of it, great, but don't do it while you're writing, because you'll kill that muse. That muse will crawl up and go hide in a cave, and you won't be able to find him for 3 or 4 weeks. You've got to have enough confidence in what you're doing to keep going to the very end before you can deal with somebody coming back going, you're not for me. Because then you can go, okay, I got something else over here.
Yeah. I know as an agent, I've held on to a few rejections for, a couple days before, because I want to deliver it when I know the client can handle it. I often tell people part of an agent's job is talking people off the wall, the bridge, because it does come as such a personal rejection, because when you're a creative, it's part of who you are as well, so you have to be careful. But that's a good point, Eddie, to have guardrails and if you know rejection's going to come, it's good to have a plan on how you're going to deal with it. I heard a pastor recently preach that, we teach the Christian life, but we don't teach our people in our congregations how to deal with pain and disappointment and heartbreak. We don't teach that so much. And he realized that his son, he had taught him well on his foundation in Christ and his identity even. But when his son hit a wall as a young man and suffered this horrible rejection professionally, and he went into depression, and the dad realized, I never prepared him for this. It's going to come. Everybody deals with rejection, that doesn't ace the job interview, or there's something, disappointment's going to come, but he hadn't prepared his son for that. And so I think why I really wanted us to have this conversation is because we need to let writers know this is part of the journey. It even happens to well-published authors.
Oh, yeah.
It comes to everybody. So it's good if you can kind of have a plan in place.